Hello and welcome. I'm Rawia Alami and this is the Dailies, where we take a look at important news stories, reports, analysis and articles published in media outlets and newspapers across the world. The chaos that engulfed the aid distribution in Gaza yesterday was the focus of many newspapers today. Some also shed the light on America's concern over Israel's push for military strikes against Iran's nuclear sites, fearing the derailment of negotiations with Iran. As for American newspapers, most focused today on President Trump's growing frustration with the Russian escalation in Ukraine, with no breakthrough in peace deal negotiations in sight. Some even reported that Trump is mulling over imposing new sanctions on Russia. Other American media outlets also reported on the new student visa pause by the American State Department as its plans for a tougher social media review. We'll start with the Washington Post's editorial, which talked about President Trump's growing frustration with Putin after months of stalled peace efforts and escalating Russian attacks. The article reviews President Donald Trump's shifting stance on Russia's war in Ukraine, saying despite previously protecting Russia from harsher consequences, Trump is now openly considering new sanctions and increased military support for Ukraine. This follows a weekend of intensive Russian drone and missile strikes that killed civilians. The editorial board points out that lawmakers from both parties are pushing for sweeping sanctions, but Trump has hesitated, fearing this could halt diplomatic talks. The editorial notes that while Trump's rhetoric has toughened, calling Putin crazy and warning he is playing with fire, it remains unclear whether he will back his words with decisive action, leaving U.S. policy at a crossroad. Le Monde published a detailed report revealing the scale of Russian losses in Ukraine, saying Moscow has not reported its death toll since the start of the war. The report is based on secret casualty data provided by Russian army deserter Alexei Ziliev, who served as a stretcher bearer and data entry officer. He also fled Russia with a database showing tens of thousands of deaths and injuries in just 2 army divisions, with actual losses likely much higher due to unrecorded casualties on the front. The report also included numerous graphs and charts depicting the extent of the Russian losses. For example, this chart here, as you can see, talks about the Russian soldiers killed in Ukraine by week. And this is, of course, according to accounts by Russian online media outlet Media Zona. As you can see, the timeline that this chart depicts stretches from December 2023 until all the way to 2026 in August. This part most likely is a speculation. But this data exposes the high cost of Russia's mass assault tactics, the use of conscripts and also prisoners, and the grim conditions faced by soldiers. According to the report, many wounded are left untreated or sent back to fight prematurely. And the true death toll is likely several times higher than official figures, highlighting the war's devastating human impact. The Wall Street Journal published an editorial reviewing the challenges facing President Trump's foreign policy in his second term, emphasizing that his approach of verbal threats and public pressure is no longer enough as he faces critical decisions on Russia, Iran, and also China. The piece highlights that Trump's promises to quickly end the Ukraine war have indeed failed, with Russia intensifying its offensive and Ukraine facing weapon shortages. On Iran, Trump's ultimatum to dismantle its nuclear program will soon require real action, risking U.S. credibility if not enforced. Also, regarding China, the article questions whether Trump's tariff threats are effective deterrents, especially over Taiwan. The review concludes that Trump's choices in the coming months will shape America's global standing and test his willingness to back tough talk with real action. We'll stay with the Wall Street Journal, which published an exclusive report revealing that the International Criminal Court Chief Prosecutor Karim Khan was preparing to seek arrest warrants for Israeli cabinet ministers Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir over their roles in expanding Jewish settlements in the West Bank. In the West Bank, of course, these actions are considered illegal under international law. Both ministers are prominent far-right figures, as you know, who have actively promoted settlement construction and called for Israel to assert full control over the West Bank. The investigation into Smotrich and Ben-Gvir is politically charged and comes at a sensitive time, as Khan has gone on leave amid a United Nations probe into allegations of sexual misconduct against him that arose suddenly as he was preparing these arrest warrants. With Khan's disputes or deputies now in charge, it is unclear if the ICC will proceed with the cases, especially given the risk of further US sanctions and the court's heightened vulnerability during the ongoing investigation on its top prosecutor. And we'll stay in the Middle East as the Telegraph reported on the US and Israeli-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation's aid distribution in southern Gaza yesterday that descended into chaos, forcing officials to flee the scene and Israeli forces to fire warning shots to control the situation. The report also reviews the controversies surrounding GHF, which has begun distributing aid in Gaza amid famine warnings and an ongoing Israeli blockade. The report highlights that Hamas has strongly urged Palestinians to avoid GHF distribution centers, warning that biometric screening required for aid could be used by Israel for intelligence gathering and targeting. As a result, turnout at aid sites has been relatively low, with many Gazans expressing fear despite desperate hunger. The GHF's operation, guarded by private security and bypassing the UN, have been condemned by humanitarian groups and the UN as politicizing and militarizing aid, undermining neutrality and also independence. The resignation of its executive director further highlights external and internal concerns about the group's approach. Moving on to the New York Times, where Thomas Friedman wrote an article reviewing the growing disillusionment within Israel about the ongoing Gaza war, highlighting how voices from across the political spectrum, left, center, and even right, are increasingly questioning Prime Minister Netanyahu's strategy and motives. Friedman also highlights that former leaders and current politicians criticize the war as aimless and damaging, both morally and strategically, while Israeli society shows signs of exhaustion and trauma. The piece also notes a parallel sense of entrapment among Gazans, with some even protesting against Hamas. The author argues that Netanyahu's refusal to pursue peace and his alliance with religious nationalist factions threatens Israeli society, drawing also comparisons to similar political trends in the US under Trump. The article concludes that the future of democracy in both countries depends on active civic engagement and organizing for change. The Guardian published an exclusive report reviewing the turmoil surrounding Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's leak investigation at the Pentagon, which has led to a breakdown in trust between the Pentagon and the White House. After 3 senior aides were fired over suspected leaks of classified military plans, advisors were told, falsely apparently, that the aides had been identified through an illegal warrantless NSA wiretap, a claim that alarmed and confused the White House officials. The report highlights the criticisms of the investigation overseen by Hegseth's personal lawyer for providing dubious information and possibly being used to settle internal scores rather than addressing genuine security breaches. The piece notes also that this entire episode has left the Pentagon's leadership in disarray, with the White House losing confidence in both the investigation and Hegseth's management, further fueling chaos and uncertainty at the top of the Defense Department. And we'll end with the Financial Times, which published a detailed report providing an in-depth review of China's Made in China 2025 industrial policy. The piece used Audi's electric vehicle plant as a case study of the success and complexity. And also the piece asked an interesting question, which is, can the world learn from this Chinese example? The Made in China 2025 policy was launched a decade ago, aimed to make China a leader in advanced manufacturing by targeting 10 key sectors, including robotics, electric vehicles, and high-tech equipment. The report details how Chinese suppliers now dominate production lines, driving down costs and increasing automation, with China surpassing Germany in robot density. While the policy has modernized Chinese manufacturing and boosted global competitiveness, it has also led to overcapacity, market distortions, and rising trade tensions with the US and Europe. The report concludes that despite criticism and mixed results in some sectors, China is doubling down on industrial policy, now focusing on next-generation technologies like AI and humanoid robots to maintain its global manufacturing edge. That's it for today. Thanks for watching.